What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Grassy TV. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about my full build guide for the Orb of Frost Jotunn in Season 6 of Hero Siege. Harness the chilling power of the Frozen North with the Orb of Frost Jotunn, a devastating ice-based build that slows, shatters, and annihilates enemies with relentless frost magic. The Orb of Frost Jotunn summons a powerful orb that deals continuous cold damage while freezing enemies in its tracks. With the strong area control and credible synergy with crowd control effects, this build excels at both clearing hordes and locking down bosses. In this guide, we'll cover the best skills, gear, strategies to maximize your Orb of Frost Jotun, ensuring that you leave nothing but frozen devastation in your wake. Embrace the cold, winter has come. Now, a quick disclaimer before we get started. The guide was created during the closed beta of Season 6 and is based on the content and mechanics available at that time. Please note that certain features, balance changes, or other game elements may be updated or modified as the game progresses towards its official release. The information presented here may not fully reflect the final version of the game, and some aspects could be subject to change. While I strive to provide the most accurate and effective build recommendations, future adjustments by the developers may impact the viability of certain strategies. Always refer to the official patch notes for the latest insights. Now, let's talk about some pros and cons of our Orb of Frost Jotun. You have extremely satisfying AoE. It very much resembles a Frozen Orb sort in Diablo 2, and I'm here for it. I absolutely love Frozen Orb. It's probably my favorite skill of all ARPGs. Just my pastime nostalgic. I absolutely love it. You have a built-in teleport skill, a built-in all resistance passive, and it's really one of the easiest classes in the game to level from 1 to 100. You get Orb of Frost pretty quickly in the campaign, and you honestly just blast with it. Now, you are going to hit a decent hard wall around Hell 3. It does take a pretty good amount of gear to scale up a Orb of Frost Jotun into these higher difficulties. And you probably be able to kill things in Hell 5 without too much struggle. But getting into some of the bossing can be a little bit difficult for the Orb of Frost Jotun. And most likely is going to require you to do a full archetype swap in order to kill those bosses without, a high level of investment. Now, it is also it can be a little bit laggy just because there's a lot of projectiles going on. I don't have the beefiest of computer, and even for me, it's not terrible. But I have noticed in some situations where if I'm not killing monsters a bit quicker, it will cause my FPS to drop a little bit. Overall, it's not too bad compared to some of the other skills. Now, let's take a look at some of these skills. First, we have Orb of Frost as our main damage. Again, we just cast a frozen orb that will put out a bunch of icicles that will kill enemies. We have a bunch of buffs for this character. One of them is Power of the Ancients. This will give us additional cold damage based on our mana. This is what we're going to be using later in the game for our mana stacking we're going to be double dipping into this mana stacking to get additional damage. As well as we have Avatar Frost. This just increases our cold skill damage. Glacial Armor increases your all resistances. Now, this was nerfed in Season 6. It's not as strong, but now you don't need as much resistances. So it kind of ends up evening out eventually. Now, we can debuff enemies with Blizzard. We'll put a giant cold break and frostbitten debuff on them. Portal Vice is how we teleport around. Damage reduction will be from Frozen Hide. This is a active that you'll have to press yourself, but you can get some additional physical damage reduction, and the duration on it's honestly not too bad. Now, if you are enjoying these build guides, please consider donating to the channel. I'll have a link to the donation link in the description of the video. So I really appreciate anybody that does donate. Thank you guys very, very much. Let's move on to our skill trees. Now, while we're leveling, we don't get access to Orb of Frost until level 16. So we're going to have to use something else. I prefer to use Flash Freeze until then. It's a cold and physical hybrid skill. So you can pick up, sources of cold damage. You can pick up sources of physical skill damage. And you can use that as a way to beef up this skill. It also has a bunch of icicles on it. It has a ball that pings between different enemies. It's honestly a really sick skill to use until level 16. So we are going to dump all of our points into Flash Freeze to get the most damage out of that as we can. Same thing for levels 8 through 15. We're just trying to get to level 16 where our Orb of Frost is. Just dump all your points into Flash Freeze. You can put 1 point into Freezing Leap. This will help you jump around between packs. It's a movement ability. I honestly, I hate this skill. I don't use it. But you by all means probably should, just because it does help you move around a bit better. I just hate the skill. Now you can put points into Flash Freeze and its energy to help reduce its mana cost while keeping its damage up. That's up to you. I really didn't have too much trouble keeping my mana sustained. You just put a few points into energy as well as find some mana on kill. Or if you have physical damage, just get any source of leech and you'll be just fine. Now, at level 16, we are going to respec our character. We're going to dump all of our points into Frozen Orb, right? As well as we'll have 1 point into our mana stacking, and we'll get 1 point into power of the Avatar of Frost once we hit level 24. So you can see level 24, we get some points into Avatar of Frost. This is a increased cold skill damage and multiplier. This ends up being a bigger multiplier than the actual synergies for Orb of Frost itself. So that's why we're going to dump into this passive if we're going for synergies. Also, make sure at level 24 that you put 1 point into your Portal of Ice. This will help you teleport around. It's very, very strong to have early. I do not go for this all resistance passive, right? The reason for it is you don't really have a whole lot of plus skills this early in the game, and getting 1 point, you're gonna be spending 3 points to get, like 2% all res or something. It's not worth the points. Now at level 60, here's what our tree's gonna look like. We have all of our points into Orb of Frost, all of our points into Avatar of Frost. We then spec into Blizzard. This is a synergy for Orb of Frost, giving it additional damage. Make sure you have your 1 point into teleport. At this point, if you have some sources of plus skills from different rune words or items, whatever it may be, you can also path down to the all resistance passive. Most likely, you're still not going to have a ton of all skills at this point to be able to beef up this passive. Again, up to you. Level 80, same idea. Usually by here, you've made a few rune words, so I end up taking the all resistance passive. You'll just continue specking into your synergies, Blizzard, Icicles. Make sure you have all your points into Orb of Frost and the Avatar of Frost. And then this is our final level 100 tree. We just have 20 points into Orb of Frost, 20 points into Blizzard, 20 points into Icicles, 20 points into Avatar of Frost, 1 point into Portal of Ice, 1 point into our Glacial Armor, and then 1 point into our physical damage reduction buff. Now, later in the game, whenever you decide to switch into mana stacking, you're going to want to drop some of these points out of either Icicles or Blizzard. I would recommend Icicles as it's a lower synergy. And you're going to dump all of them into this Power of the Ancients because we're going to be mana stacking. We'll get additional damage based off our mana. So for this tree here, this is our non-mana stacking tree. But once you switch into mana stacking, you will want to change to the Power of the Ancients. Now, for sub skill trees, if you're not familiar with them, they were new in season 5. You'll simply click on the plus sign in the top right of a skill. You can see this little plus sign right here. And this is going to open up a new window that looks like this, a little tree. And you get 1 point for this tree for every 5 character levels for every skill that you have allocated. You can reset this skill tree anytime for free. So feel free to experiment with it. But here are the skill trees that I would recommend. For Orb of Frost, this tree is going to maximize the amount of projectiles that Orb of Frost will have, as well as it gives it additional cooldown reduction. It's important to note that this cooldown reduction is not a flat amount. So you know how it'll say 10% cooldown reduction per point for this node here. It's not 10% on your tooltip in your talent tree. It's a multiplicative 10%. So if you get all 5 points in here, that's 50% cooldown reduction. You're going to have half the time of the wait time of cooldown for your skill to come back. It's very, very good. Be sure that you're taking this cooldown reduction. It's not the same cooldown reduction that you're getting on gear. It's a multiplicative cooldown reduction. We'll also take the node that makes the orbs bounce off of walls. This is up to you. So this point right here will make it so that whenever you throw out your Orb of Frost, it will bounce off of terrain. This can be really good in like narrow situations, or maybe you're fighting a boss that's close to a wall or something. You can make it bounce off to do additional damage. However, if you're going and clearing out full maps, you can see in the footage that we have above me that my orbs actually go through everything, and it's much better than making them bounce off of terrain because that would be less clear. So just something to note: if you end up deciding to not go this because you're out clearing, you'll just kind of path up to this cooldown reduction. Then you'll make your way up through here. You'll only be able to get 4 points into the amount of projectiles, which is totally fine. But make sure that you still max out your cooldown reduction. Now, for Portal of Ice, this tree is really just going to maximize the range and the faster cast rate for movement. So here's your range right here. Here's faster cast rate. You can go for 1 point over here on the far left. This will give it a Orb of Frost, like a static Orb of Frost on the ground that does some damage. It's just kind of cool to look at. You can also go to this top right node up here. This will make it so that you'll pull monsters. That's what you're seeing in the footage. Whenever I teleport, I actually am trying to pull monsters around me. Honestly, you're generally so far away from monsters that it doesn't really do a whole lot. I just again think it's kind of cool. The main thing here is to get the range, get the FCR, get the reduced mana cost so that it's basically free to teleport, and then from there you can kind of decide what you want to do. Now, for Blizzard, this tree is really just for bossing or the tankier targets. We're going to use this to debuff enemies with Cold Break and Frostbite. For attributes, skills can be quite expensive to use early in the game. So you're going to want to put points into energy early on so that you can sustain your mana, right? Until you can find your first sources of cold skill damage. This will greatly increase your damage, making you not have to use as much mana. So what I would recommend while you're leveling is you put 2 points into intelligence, 2 points into vitality, and just have enough energy for the build to feel comfortable. Typically in the start of the game, acts 1 through act 3, you're looking at like 150, 200 mana generally is okay for most casters. If you need a little bit more, you can go a little bit more. If you feel like you're fine, you can take some out. Obviously, having mana on kill completely negates needing much mana. But if you're fighting a boss, getting a bit more of that mana can make quite a big difference in your experience fighting those bosses. Now, once you make it to end game, you're going to dump all of your points into intelligence if you're a non mana stacker, or into energy if you are a mana stacker. So it just really kind of depends on what version of the build that you're currently in. For gearing, this section is really designed to give you workable suggestions on what gear to acquire at different stages of the game. You as a player are going to need to look at your current gear and figure out what makes sense for you. Due to the addition of sub skill trees, there's some item proc combos that we're not going to talk about here, but it's really up to you to experiment. Now, while we're leveling from levels 1 to 100, for most of the leveling, you're going to be searching for rare or mythic items that'll match your character's damage type. Again, we are cold damage, but you may come across some satanics that also just really make sense to use. I can't guarantee that you're going to drop any specific satanic, nor will I stop leveling or tell you to stop leveling to go farm for a specific satanic. It's a waste of your time. So my gearing recommendations for the 1 to 100 isn't going to include them. Rune words, however, are nearly guaranteed, as the bases are very common, and you can obtain any rune from completing the Act 1 Normal Nightmare quests, Hell quests, up to Vex rune. Then you can go to the prospect station in the top right of Act 1 Town and downgrade those runes to the ones that you need. But be sure that you check the runes level requirement and the white basis level requirement to be sure that you meet both before making a rune word. The in-game journal can be a bit misleading on the minimum level requirements, so be sure that you check these for yourself. And to reiterate this, whenever you make a rune word, the rune itself, you can look at the tooltip. It'll have a level requirement, and the base at the bottom right, it'll have a tier for the item. So an S tier typically requires level 52 versus a D tier might only require level 10. So you got to make sure that you check the level requirement for both of those and that you meet both. Moving on for our weapons, again, we are looking for normal through mythic items. Generally speaking, we're just looking for cold skill damage percentage, cold skills like plus skills, life, mana on kill, faster cast rate, intelligence, energy, any of the things that you would typically look for just to make your experience on a caster easier. Now, you can make a Sky Song as early as level 29. So if you happen to find a 4 socket sword on the ground or a spellblade, you can make a Sky Song in that. For our offhand, same thing. We're just looking for cold skills, faster cast rate. You can get movement speed on shields, life percent, resistances, intelligence, any of that sort of stuff is fantastic. You can also make a Sky Song and a shield, right? This will give you some skills, faster cast rate. I recommend that you go for a Divine Contemplation. This just gives you an absolute shitload of resistances. And with resistances changing in season 6, this is going to be very, very nice for staying alive. So I recommend you go that over the Sky Song. Up to you. Helmets, kind of the same deal for our normal through mythic affixes. And then for helmets, there is Scholar. This will give you a skill with some physical damage reduction, which is really nice, and mana on kill. So very, very cheap helmet. Chest, same idea. We're just looking for, skills. You can get movement speed on chest, faster cast rate, life, damage reduction, any of that sort of stuff. Now, you can also make a shadow. This is a super cheap rune word, just a Toll and an Eth rune. This will give you a ton of movement speed as well as faster cast rate to help you teleport around the axe early. And you also get some hit recovery. Now, hit recovery in season 5 is, I don't want to say it's a useless stat, but it's not as don't really notice it as much whenever you get hit by monsters. In season 6, you do know, especially early on. Like you get hit by a couple of monsters and you're like stun stuck. So this faster hit recovery is actually really nice to have early. Now, if you can find a 3 socket test armor, the Freljord is fantastic as well. You get up to 4 skills, FCR, cooldown reduction, cold skill damage, penetration. Everything on this is fantastic. This is really what you kind of want to go for, but you're most likely not going to be able to get that until around Nightmare. For gloves, we can't make rune words in gloves, so here's just some typical affixes that you'd look for. Kind of the same thing we're looking for on all the other pieces of gear. For boots, again, kind of the same thing that we're looking for in other pieces of gear. However, you can make quick steps or ghost. Ghost is going to be your better option, but it's going to require a mal rune. So you're going to have to get lucky from your normal or nightmare quests and get a mal or higher to drop down. I would not recommend that you prospect a Vex rune. Vex is very, very sought after. You're going to need one yourself. So don't prospect a Vex rune. But if you get the a goal or a mal, then by all means go for a ghost. You can get two skills on it, tons of physical damage and magic damage reduction. You get movement phasing, allowing you to move through enemies. So that's also really nice. Most likely, you're only going to be able to make quick steps, and these are really just nice to have to be able to move around quickly. I mean, you get this one has 93% movement speed on it. There's nothing else on here that really does anything for the build. Maybe some energy, and because you have Portal of Ice, you're able to just kind of teleport around anyway. You could really just get away with going for like FCR or mythic boots that you find on the ground. That would probably serve you better than quick steps. For belts, again, looking for faster cast rate. You can get an absolute shitload of faster cast rate on belts, life, resistances, intelligence, mana, skills, any of that sort of stuff. Same thing for rings. Same thing for amulets. Now, for amulets specifically, you can get a ton of plus skills that are class specific. So, something to keep an eye out for on amulets. And for charms, kind of the same idea, looking for if you get really lucky and find a plus skills grand charm, right? You could use that. You're probably not going to find that. But looking for sources of flat damage, of flat cold skill damage, cold skill damage or magic skill damage percentage, resistances, life percent, faster cast rate, life and mana on kill, intelligence, movement speed, enhanced defense is a very underrated affix. So any of this stuff is going to be fantastic to get on your charms. I think people underrate how powerful just mythic or rare charms can be for rounding out their builds, especially when they're leveling and trying to get into early hell difficulty. So do not skimp out on your charms. Now, whenever we hit level 100, we're going to have some different gear options. There's really no best in slot gear at this point. We could really swap out any of these recommended items for strong mythics. Item decisions are really just going to revolve around how your character feels over direct power. So, for example, our character has a built-in teleport, but maybe we have low cast rate. It's going to feel slow because we don't have the juice to get going with. So, picking items that have more FCR on them are going to make more sense than maybe picking something that has an extra skill on it or two because we're going to be able to move around a bit better and get to, bosses or get through maps, whatever it is that we're doing. Now, you could really put any combination of these items together and feel capable of completing hell difficulty and begin pushing difficulty. That's ultimately the goal of this section is just to help you get through hell 1 difficulty so you can unlock satanic zones and you can start your early farming. So let's take a look at weapons. First, we have Sky Song, we have Divinities, we have Dragon Knight's Flail. Sky Song is a good option. You get 3 skills, some FCR. There's some good stuff in here. This is like the spirit of Hero Siege. The best option here would be Divinity. You can actually wear 2 of these on a Jotun. These are going to give 4 skills, 50 FCR. You can get up to 40% all resistances. You can find maces with intelligence on them or intelligence based on your level, which would be, I think it's 45 intelligence. That's 45% magic skill damage. You can find magic skill damage. You can find all sorts of stuff on a base for divinities. Rock 2 of these, very, very strong. You do need a Vex rune. Now, a poor man's divinity would be Dragon Knight's Flail. You can see this just is basically the exact same thing. It just has its values reduced by just a hair. So these are fantastic. You can rock 2 of these as well until you can make your divinities. For offhands, we have Sky Song, Divinity, Divine Contemplation, Sumi Finland, Swatana, and Gem Encrusted Tower. All these are fantastic options. Divinity, I think, is your best option just because you get everything, right? That you really need. Divine Contemplation can give you a ton of all res as well. Sumi can give you a ton of all res skills. FCR, another decent option with 4 sockets on it. Sky Song being probably the least of the bunch that I would go for personally. But if you can't find any of the other juice and all you found was a 4 socket shield on the ground, by all means make one. It's still a good option. Now for helmets, we have Scholar, which is honestly easily replaced by Crown of the Midnight, Creative Secrets, or Crown of the North. Crown of the North being the best option here. It's absolutely insane. You get everything that you'll need, but any of these options would serve you just fine for Hell 1. For chess, Freljord is our best option here. You just get an absolute stupid amount of value for the low runes that it does cost. You could also go for Heaven's Might. This is going to give a ton of skills, up to 6 sockets, and a ton of PDR and MDR. Really, really good option. If you just want a bunch of resistances, Gladstone Goose can give you 52 all res, is what it's currently at in season 6. So any of these will be just fine. For gloves, we have Conjured Mitts, Anubis's Mighty Gauntlets, Mevius's Mighty Hands, Wisdom Holds. I would say Wisdom Holds is probably my preferred option here, just because you get mana, you get int, you get FCR, you get up to 2 skills. But really, any of these will be just fine. A side note: Mevius's Mighty Gauntlets can roll any elements. So you could roll +3 to cold here as well. For boots, we have Wizard Boots, Quick Steps, Ghosts, or Grand Wizard Silk Shoes. Quick Steps is only if you just, for whatever reason, you don't want to teleport and you just want to run around instead. That would be the best way to get the most movement speed early. From there, Grand Wizards is going to have the most skills with some FCR on it. Really, really nice option. Same for Ghosts, 2 skills, MDR, PDR, and movement phasing. Very nice as well. And if you have no other option, you could go for Wizard Boots. For belts, we have Viper Magi, Knight's Girdle, Commander Sash, Sash of the Magi, uh, Singulum, I think how you pronounce that, the Jotun version. If you can find a Singulum or whatever with the Jotun skills on it, that's a good option. This has been buffed in season 6. From there, I would say my preferred option would be Sash of the Magi, but you could get away with really any of these. So whatever kind of fits into the build, you could get some resistances from Commander Sash, you could get a couple of skills from Knight's Girdle, whatever makes sense for you. For rings, you could go with 2 Wedding Bands. These have +1 skills on them. The rest of it's kind of meh. I mean, obviously, you do get some life on Wedding Band, which is nice, but you don't really need the movement speed on this character. You could also go for Iron Ring or Prometheus's. This gives you a ton of faster cast rate to zoom around with and some Magic Find. Some early Magic Find is really nice. A Signet of Bifrost is currently hero bound, but you could run for that. There's a whole, I think on the wiki, you can actually find information on how to get a Signet of Bifrost. So that's a good option as well. As well as you can find mythic rings with plus cold skills on them. So be sure you're looking out for those with your leaf filter. And the last option, I didn't type it in, but it looks like we have a Satanic Eye. This can give you up to 30% all resistances. This is a lot going into season 6. So if you maybe want to rock 1 Iron Ring or 1 Kodos and throw in a Satanic Eye in there just to round out your reses, that's a good option as well. For amulets, we have Unfathomable Puzzle, Shining Pearl, and the All Seeing Eye. Unfathomable Puzzle, I mean, decent 20% magic skill, up to 30% magic skill damage. All Seeing Eye is going to be your best option here. 3 skills, a ton of magic find. Shining Pearl can be decent as well because you're getting 50 magic skill damage with life and mana. It's also kind of insane. For charms, we're really just looking for those rare and mythic charms and trying to find certain affixes on them that make sense for the build. Here's kind of a list of those here. And then for your satanic charms, these aren't really an early game buy, but I did want to show them in case you're able to pick one of these up early. They're very, very strong. Iascati is now an SS tier satanic charm or an SS heroic. I'm not sure which one. Either way, this gives you an absolute shitload of penetration. This is a good item to try to pick up early. And same for the Cold Giant's Charm. It gives up to 20% cold skill damage and some penetration, which is very, very useful for any elemental build. So something just to keep an eye out for early in the game. Moving along to our mid game, in order to scale a cold caster, there's several aspects that you're going to need to understand. First is increased cold skill damage. This is a direct multiplier of your skill's base damage. A similar mod would be magic skill damage, which includes all elemental types. As well as we have intelligence, which increases our magic skill damage by 1% per 1 intelligence. So all of these sources are going to be really important to scale up and are added together before multiplying your base damage. So if you had 20 points in Orb of Frost, say it has 1,000 damage as your base damage, you then take cold skill damage, magic skill damage, and the magic skill damage that you're getting from intelligence. All of those are added together, right? You take the sum of all of those and multiply it by your base damage, and that's how you get damage on these elemental builds. So gaining more base damage is done through soft points and hard points. Soft points are the things that you get from skills or from items that give you plus skills, and hard points are literally you clicking on the skill yourself. So it's important to note that plus skills generally has no diminishing returns versus percent skill damage does later on in the game. Now we can continue scaling your damage with faster cast rate, which literally increases your cast rate. The more times that you're casting, the more damage that you're doing. And for Orb of Frost specifically, you're going to need sources of cooldown recovery. This is going to give you more uptime because there is a small cooldown on Orb of Frost. So having cooldown recovery is essentially faster cast rate, or it's going to give you more Orbs of Frost, which is more damage. Monsters in Hero Siege also have elemental resistances. So in order to reduce them, you're going to need sources of minus enemy cold resistance. This is not a res difference, it's a reduction. So if you obtain 100% ignore cold resistance on a monster that has 10,000 cold resistance, the monster will have 0 resistance. Let's also note that monsters cannot go below 0 resistance, right? So just again, it's very, very important to note that if a monster had 10,000 cold res and you get 100% minus enemy cold resistance, it doesn't go down to 9,900, right? It goes to 0. So cold break in Hero Siege is basically like a curse. You can apply a 50% break to a monster. It'll take 50% increased damage from that element that was stated. So in this case, it'd be cold break. So they then take 50% increased cold damage. It's important to note that different sources of break typically do not stack. So if you're getting, 50% from Orb of Frost, you can't combine that with another 50% from Blizzard, for example. There are some that do, and it's a bit finicky. For extra damage, there's extra damage will multiply all of these previous values, and it's a more damage multiplier on top of everything. So once you have gone through here and you've got your base damage, you've multiplied it with all these values, you have your cooldown recovery, you have your pen, you have your cold break, you have all of these things, you get that final number, and then you had another 100% extra damage that gets multiplied on top of all of that. It's a more damage multiplier essentially. And all of these mods are going to be important for scaling up your damage on a cold caster. So let's talk about the mid game, right? The mid game can be a bit interesting because you're going to have to do one of two things. One, you're going to have to start pivoting towards mana stacking, or two, you're going to stay away from the mana stacking and just pivot to as much like penetration and skills and just playing like a typical caster until you can then transition to a mana stacker. So it really just kind of depends on what direction you want to go with this. So let's talk about weapon options. Book of Cold Death. This has been changed in season 6. It now has Power of the Ancients as a O skill. The Power of the Ancients is a skill that we have on Jotun. It increases your damage based on your mana. So this is a really good option, even if you're not mana stacking. You could also run 2 divinities still, because you can dual wield these. You can find ones with crazy bases like +5 bases to get 9 skills. You're gonna have 18 skills on 2 maces with up to 80 all res. That's a lot. And 100% FCR, that's crazy. You could also run Hypothermia, right? This can give up to 9 skills with some FCR. You also get a ton of cold skill damage. This is a decent option as well. Personally, my favorite version is going the Book of Cold Death, just because you get a ton of additional minus any cold res. You get 40%, right, on one item is crazy. For offhands, you'll probably want to use Shield of the Abyss for a while because this is going to give you your minus enemy cold resistance. So this goes up to 20%. And if you're using that in combination with the Book of Cold Death, that's 60% of your pen completed within 2 items. So it's huge. But there are some other options. You could go with the Suomi. This will give you up to 6 sockets, 4 skills, FCR. You can put a bunch of like Umbrans in there to get even more resistance, whatever you need to do. Just a side note, Umbrans are no longer 20%. They're now 7% all res. You could also pick up an Ancient Aegis if you had no other option, right? This can give you some value as well for like res and skills and stuff. For helmets, we're going to want to use a plus skill base for either Delirium or Cursed Rune Words. Both of these are okay, right? The Curse, unfortunately, you would have to roll this until you get the cold skills. So a little bit harder to make use of versus Delirium is guaranteed to give us up to 8 skills. And then we can get a base with 5. So you get 13 skills on a helmet. Insane. Our best in slot helmet is going to be a Gabriel's Dauntless Vision. So it's going to be a bit harder to obtain even in the mid game for the Orb of Frost Jotunn, just because you don't have the best bossing damage. But if you're able to pick one up, or maybe you're able to swap into a Fizz bosser, this could be worth your time because it has everything. It has skills, it has cooldown recovery, it has magic skill damage, it has everything that we're going to need. And then another good option is Harlequin Veil. You get up to 5 skills with 3 sockets on it, Magic Find, all resistances, PDR, MDR, just another decent option to have. Since you have a built-in teleport, you can kind of get away with running a Harlequin Veil. For chest, Gem Kings can be a decent option when socketed with 6 sapphires. right? This is going to give you a ton of cold skills, as well as I do believe that you get, what do you get? I think you get mana. You get increased mana percent with sapphires. Uh, Azarius is a good option if you're in hardcore. And then our best in slot, it's kind of hidden here, but our best in slot is this Grand Arc Wizard's Mantle. This is a new chest in season 6. This is what's going to make mana stacking become viable. Because of this, you'll gain radiant power. This is going to convert a portion of your mana into elemental damage. So we are using Book of Cold Death. That's going to convert a portion of our mana into elemental damage. We have our Power of the Ancients from the actual skill on our tree. That's going to convert part of our mana into elemental damage. We also have this Granarch's Wizard Mantle that's going to convert part of our mana into elemental damage. So we're using all these different sources to scale up our mana to damage conversion. As well as you can see on this chest, it's kind of fucked up. You get up to like the mana increase. So this I believe I have star leveled. So it's not going to be this high, right? It's not going to be this high. But you can also get 4,900 flat mana. You get 400 energy, bunch of all resistances, 6 sockets. Uh, Actually, I take it back. I don't think this one was star leveled. So in these 6 sockets, I put 6 runes in there. Those are 10% each. So it'll be a little bit less than that, right? It will be a little bit less than that. You also get another 84 attributes. It's just a crazy, crazy armor to get a ton of mana on. Now, before you're able to get into those, you could also run a Tundra Hunters. These are pretty cheap, generally, even at the start of a season. You get up to 8 skills. You'll get some penetration, 20% pin, cold skill damage. This could really help you if you're rocking this Tundra Hunters with the Shield of the Abyss and with the Book of Cold Death. That's going to take care of up to 80% of your pen. Very, very strong. For gloves, mana hungers are going to be your best in slot if you're mana stacking. Then the frostbittens are good if you haven't swapped to mana stacking yet, just because again you get the extra damage to deep frozen monsters. Very, very nice. You get up to 7 skills. All right, very good. You could also, once you have switched into mana stacking, or maybe you aren't in mana stacking, you just feel like you have good sustainable damage for clearing with. You could also run Demon Fire Accelerators. These will make your Orb of Frost zoom out much farther and much faster. So that's really nice to get. And then I have Spellweavers and Fighter Magi's. If you happen to pick these up for cheap or if you drop them, they can be okay as well. Spellweavers has a rolling element on it now, so you can get cold skills on Spellweavers. For boots, you're going to ideally want to get Ether Walks with cold skill rolls, but again, you're going to have to roll this until it hits cold skills, and it takes a Surin per roll, so good luck on that. You could also go with Pearlescent Dreams. These have a ton of all resistances on them. You get Magic Find. You also have Holy Aura, which increases your magic skill damage, so these are a great option as well. For belts, Freya's is going to be a good option. This again up to 4 skills. You get cold skill damage, right? Just it's a really good option. If you can get a decent roll Sash of the Eternal Hatred with like, plus cold skills with some penetration on it, or just really even just getting pen on this belt would be really, really good because this can help finish out your penetration. For rings, all of your boss rings that we were getting from Hell 5 in Season 5 have been moved to Inferno difficulty. So yeah, these are going to be a bit harder to get, right? You might be able to purchase one, but I can imagine being behind Inferno difficulty, they're not going to be accessible super early and they're going to be expensive. So you can go and try and farm out a Soul Gem if you have a +3 Azazel's ring. The Soul Gem drop rate has been buffed to 1 in 11,000 rolled 9 times. So it's almost half of what it was before. It has a much higher drop rate than it had in season 5. It's still going to take you some time, right? And you also have to get the +3 Azazel ring. These have been the drop rate of them has been nerfed in season 6, so it's gonna be much harder to find a +3 Azazels. Will be a bit more expensive, but these things are insane if you can make one. It basically looks just like this, but it'll be fire or cold instead of fire for the cold version. Now, if you happen to find a St. Aaron's or you can afford a St. Aaron's, that would be a fantastic option as well. It's that way you can get your pen finished out. And then from there, you really have options. Like you could go for a +3 skills, Jotun, Zephyr. You could go for a Signet of the Harbinger. These are decent as well, right? But much, much harder to get into the signets. For amulets, we have a ton of different options here. Really, any of these will be just fine. For tree Theos falls, you could try and look for again pen. You could look for cold skills. You could look for attributes. You could do look for more resistances to fix your resistances. Any of those things will be just fine. Pendant of Eternity is going to be just really nice for AoE clearing or clearing through maps. This is going to give you this venerated one proc. This gives you a shitload of faster cast rates. You can zoom through maps faster. From there, we also have Philosopher's Stone. Very solid option up to 4 skills, attributes, all res, kind of everything that we need on an amulet slot. Now for charms, there's a lot of charms to really look out for while you're grinding. You can also find really strong mythic charms with plus skills, magic skill damage, intelligence, any of that sort of stuff. CDR, all of those will be important to scaling up your Overfrost damage. For Tablet of the Awakening, you could go for either 4 elemental gems or you could put Umbrins in there for resistances, as well as trying to find things like a Watermelon, Annihilator, Fulgurite, Torstein's Anvil. All these are going to be really good charms. As well as you back in our mid or early game, right? We had the Eye of Scotty and the Cold Giant charm. If you haven't had a chance to get these yet, I um, would recommend trying to get these charms as they are very, very strong as well. Now, for our end game min maxing, when it comes to min maxing a character, there's really a lot of variables to consider as people we're gonna have different play styles and different goals with the characters. Starting in season 6, Hero Siege will have a new item called the Satanic Crystal. When cubed with an item, it will either add a new affix or destroy your item. So this is going to take min-maxing a character really to a whole new level. As of right now, I do not have a list of possible corruptions, so my gearing recommendations will not include them. This section will include a build I use for in-game testing, but it still can be pushed further with the new season 6 features or mythics I was really unable to obtain when I was testing. But this gaming in-game build does it's a result of my testing and refinement, and I can confidently vouch for its effectiveness. However, the builds are always subject to change and are really up to personal preference. There may be more optimal variations depending on your playstyle, the zones that you're tackling, or the bosses that you're facing. Feel free to experiment and adapt. This guide serves as a strong foundation, but really the best build is the one that works for you. You can see here is my current setup. I will also mention that Mana Hungers, I do have Demon Fires on currently over the Mana Hungers. And here's what that gear looks like. So you can see quite expensive, but well worth it once put together. For relics, here's a list of relics that'll work with the build. Lost Swan, Holy Bible, Magic Mushroom, Holy Grail. All these are fantastic. You could swap, Holy Grail for Triforce. It does now only give 10% dollar res instead of 30%, but that could be a swap. You could also maybe swap the Lost Swan for the Triforce or Steam Sale, just because you don't really need the FCR. However, if you are in the mana stacking variant, I would recommend keeping it just because you get 50 energy, which is a lot for the mana stacking. For potions, here's a list of different potions that'll work for the build. Ghostly potions will give you magic skill damage. Wizard potion will give you cast rate. Amon Ra's demise. It's really cool. It'll give you some explodey. Elixir of unworldly cognition give you experience. This is now an SS tier. Witch's potion. This is an oh shit button for life and mana. The gold inlaid potion will give you magic find and gold find. Empty bottle of vodka will now give you plus skills. So just a heads up, the gold laid mysterious potion is now an angelic potion. So good luck. Bottle of Rad will give you some movement speed and phasing. Probably not needed if you're running ghosts, or probably just not needed in general if you're teleporting around. But there's an option there. And if you have a source of burn on the build, you could also go for a caffeinated coffee container because this will give you extra damage to burning monsters or increased damage to burning monsters. For chest augments, your best in slot is going to be either Monstrosity or Elementalist. It depends if you're mana stacking or not. So Monstrosity is the non-mana stacking version, and the Elementalist is the mana stacking version. And then if you're in hardcore, you could go for Survivor's Shield. However, this will be a massive DPS decrease. I wouldn't recommend this even in hardcore. For hero levels, I do have a full guide on how to spec your hero level tree, as the tree generally just provides utility over character power, so it's very situational. This video will describe different paths you might take based on your character's situation. Again, I'll have a link to that in the description. Same thing for glyphs. All glyphs in Hero Siege are currently just utility to enhance your gameplay. They don't provide any player power. So if you want some information on these glyphs, I do have a link in the description where you can check out all of the current glyphs for Hero Siege. Now, this build does use the Act 1 Night Mercenary. Currently in Season 5, Mercenaries only have one purpose. They're really just a magic find bot, and that doesn't change going into Season 6. They're just going to continue being a magic find bot or an aura bot. So we're going to be stacking as much of that as we can. Here's what the Mercenary skill tree looks like. We're just taking sources of damage reduction, life regen, life on hit, that sort of thing. For weapons, right, here's our list of magic find weapons, as well as I do have Aurora's Might in here. This can give you a huge resistance aura for your character. Now, I personally don't like having a huge chunk of my resistances coming from my Merc, because if my Merc dies, then I don't have res, but that's up to you. For chests, we have Upis, Empires, Military Plate, Mystic Allure. Mystic Allure is going to be your best option with 2 sockets. Put a bunch of Istrunes in these, but any of these will be fine. Same thing for helmets, Istrunes in any of these to get the most magic find out of them. And same thing for offhands, Istrunes in any of these to get as much magic find. Moving on to loot filters. To make highlighting items easy, I'll quickly explain how to add a filter in less than 30 seconds. So you're going to press escape, go to your options, gameplay, and loot filter. You're going to see a screen that looks just like this. And on this right side, you're going to see different highlight presets that you can select. So for this build in particular, we're going to be selecting the Cold Caster preset. This is going to highlight things on items that cold casters will generally want on their build. And then as you're leveling through, you'll see on this left side, you have filter settings. You have the filter presets. You have normal, nightmare, early hell, mid game hell, end game hell. So you're simply just going to click on these presets as you're leveling through the game. So if you're in normal, click on normal. If you're in nightmare, click on nightmare. I am going to have some of my filters that I will use at the beginning of a season, depending on what archetype I'm playing. Just things that I've tailored for myself and what I think is good to get on items. So I will have a link to that in the description of the video once I have that video available. Same thing for my endgame filters. After the season starts and we build some endgame filters, I will post those in the descriptions of the video as well. So you guys will have endgame filters. Now, some additional helpful resources. It's just really just leveling basics and just some additional information. If you're a new player or a returning player, I do recommend that you kind of hang out and listen through this. I can give you some basic information on how Hero Siege functions, right? And some different tips for Hero Siege. The first would be the new player beginner guide. I did make a 2.5 hour beginner guide going through pretty much anything and everything that you want to know about Hero Siege, explaining all of the mechanics, all the items, all the things and stuff. So I do have a link to that in the description as well. Be sure to check that out if you're a new player. Now, before you get started in Hero Siege, be sure you equip your companion. Everyone gets a free companion. Set up your highlight filter, configure your controls. Here's a snippet of what my controls look like. I like to change my minimap color, my health bar scale, and stuff like that. I also do suggest that you change your minimap hotkey to tab. This will make your minimap overlay permanent like D2 and PoE. Be sure you swap your FPS to 60 FPS. Trust me, it's going to make your performance much better. And whenever you are trying to assign skills to your skill bar, simply just click on this here and you'll get your bar that opens up to select your skill. But a lot of people that have issues getting skills on their skill bar. Now, whenever you're leveling, there's a efficient way to do this. There's additive damage and there is skill damage. For the Orb of Frost Jotunn specifically, the additive damage does not work. You are only looking for skill damage in order to scale up the damage of your Orb of Frost. Whenever you're farming zones, there are some different areas in the game that you might want to go to help get you better experience gear. You do not have to follow this. Like some classes are just really good at zooming through the game. They don't really need to stop to gear or get XP or anything. But if you feel like you just need a bit of extra juice, here are some different places in the game that you may want to check out. For me personally, I always do rat den. I'm a hell one rat den. I'm a nightmare rat den. I'm a normal rat den. I pretty much always do rat den, and I kind of always go through like 3-3 at least once while I'm leveling. For questing, there's no required quest to complete the game. So there's nothing that you have to do to get all the way through the campaign or even in the end game. There are no required quests in Hero Siege. However, there are some reasons that you might want to do them. So for Act 1 normal, Act 1 nightmare, and Act 1 hell, you do get runes up to Vex from all of the quests. And then in Act 1 normal, you also get a speed potion and a speed charm that can be very useful. Not as useful for the Overfrost and just again because you have a teleport ability. But for other classes, this can be very, very nice. If you need some additional information on how to scale your damage, we kind of talked about this already in the mid game section, but I will hover over all of this so you can see, um, how we scale our damage up on a cold caster. Season 6 right now is expected to start on March 14th. This may change. So I do have a link to the official Season 6 live patch notes in the description of the video if you want to check out what's going on for Season 6. There's a ton of new things coming, a ton of interesting things. So I recommend you give that a read. Same thing for the official Hero Siege Wiki. I'll have a link to this in the description as well. This will give you a ton of information that's maybe not covered in this video, or if you need some other general knowledge, there's a lot of information in here. Understand that this is maintained by some of the mods, some of the other players in the community. This is not maintained by Panic Art Studios, so some of the information may be either outdated or just needs to be refreshed. So just a heads up, but there is still a lot of information in here. Now, once you hit level 100, I do have a full early game progressions, tips, and tricks video. This is going to tell you some of the different things that you can do at level 100. I have a full, not only video, but I have a full written guide available in that video as well for you to kind of read through to give you some additional farming tips and just, what can you do at level 100, right? I get that question a lot. Also, there's the Hero Siege helper. Be sure you bookmark this. Link is in the description. This is going to give you a ton of information on just different things. Like I use it whenever I have all my keys to go to dungeons and I don't know which, which dungeon I want to go to, which key corresponds to which dungeon. I can go in here and click on keys and it'll tell me, oh, the smelly cheese goes to Rat Den, or whatever it may be. So very, very good resource. He's also working on I saw he's working on a build simulator for this website. So that's really, really cool. Again, be sure you bookmark this. I will also have a link to all my builds in the description of the video. That way you can check out any of the content that I have currently available, to get some inspiration for a new build. And with that being said, that is going to wrap up our full build guide for the Orb of Frost Jotun in Season 6 of Hero Siege. It is a monster of a build. It's a lot of fun. I really, really enjoy Orb of Frost Jotun. However, it is going to take, I think, a bit more of an experienced player to be able to push it from those early stages up into the Hell 5 difficulties and be able to kill bosses. So not for the faint of heart, but very, very satisfying if you make it work. Be sure you hit that like and subscribe button to keep up to date with all of my future Hero Siege related content and news. And come check us out live on Twitch at twitch.tv/Graxy_TV. We're playing the Season 6 beta. Currently, I am making a bit more of the videos, so I haven't been as live as much as I was the last couple of weeks. But we are going to be going back and leveling up. I think we're on a storm mover right. So, yeah, well, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.